I got a heart of steel. Don't get what you say.
The music of Ukraine. Joseph Lindsley reporting for us now. What are we listening to here, Joe?
Hey, Bob. Good afternoon from Lviv. So this week, the annual Eurovision Song Contest will be held in Liverpool in the United Kingdom. It's supposed to be, normally would be in Ukraine, because last year Ukraine won Eurovision quite famously with the band Kalus Orchestra, a very sort of like traditional song with some modern sounds. And this song that we are listening to is Ukraine's submission for this year's Eurovision Song Contest. And it's an interesting duo. It's called Tvorchi. It's a duo of a guy named Taras from the city of Ternopil in western Ukraine, and a guy named Jeffrey who came from Nigeria. He's a Nigerian immigrant to Ukraine. He came here to study medicine, and the two of them met maybe 8 years ago in the city of Ternopil, and they became friends by trying to help each other learn. Jeffrey was trying to learn Ukrainian, and Taras wanted to learn English, and they realized that they could make music together, and they've become one of Ukraine's most popular music groups. And so it's interesting for their selection. Ukraine chose this year to be represented a song at Eurovision with a song in English called Heart of Steel, which is a reference to the Azov steel factory, the Avastal factory, which is where, that was the last holdout of the Ukrainians in the city of Mariupol. So it's, horrible things were happening there. And so this song is actually kind of an upbeat and joyful song about having a heart of steel and keeping going. And Ukraine will be represented by a native Ukrainian and a Ukrainian transplant from Nigeria in the contest that will be this week in Liverpool. And today I was thinking of this song. I was running in this blue sky, beautiful day in Lviv. We all got through yesterday fairly quietly, the big Russian military holiday. And two things I saw. One, I passed a new water pump, sort of in a beautiful stone courtyard. The city of Lviv had just installed a cast iron pump and people bring their their containers, gallon containers, to fill up water. And it's sort of like a return to the old times when you would go to the village water well. And so in that, I saw both the resilience, but it's probably also good for your health to drink the natural spring water and not to have to buy bottled water. And so even as Ukrainians are adapting to be more resilient in the wartime, in some ways it makes it even, life can be pleasant in a way, and perhaps even healthier as you learn to be more resourceful. And then nearby there, I stopped by the memorial. It was such a beautiful day, and there's a place called the Memorial of the Heavenly Hundred, and it overlooks the old city. You can see the spires and the domes and the sort of fairy tale-like towers of Lviv. And that memorial commemorates the approximately 100 Ukrainian protesters who were killed in Kyiv in 2014 during the Revolution of Dignity. They were killed by the secret police called the Berkut. And, yesterday in Putin's speech and so many of his speeches, he makes it seem like, Russia's the victim. And then he has this idea that Ukraine is part of Russia, that Russia somehow created Ukraine. And, of course, there is a Soviet legacy here, because for so many decades, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. And before that, imperial parts of Ukraine were part of Imperial Russia. And you can see it in the Soviet architecture. You see not as much in Lviv, but, you see the Soviet apartment buildings in many cities throughout Ukraine. But the real legacy is this of Ukrainian identity is not architecture and buildings. It's the spirit of freedom going back to the Kozak days. And that's something that, Moscow, it seems, doesn't comprehend. I mean, they didn't seem to factor that into their war plans, that, there's no Kyiv regime, that they have to actually, every man, woman, and child here is resisting them. And if you just looked at what happened in 2014, you could see that in the Ukrainian spirit. As I was looking at that monument of 2014, I was imagining what Ukraine was like in 2013, and it was so different from what it is today. I mean, there was a secret police. It was, in many ways, it was like Moscow is today. And Ukraine was starting at, even though they had independence in 1991, they were starting to drift more and more into the orbit of Moscow and not to become a modern civilized society. And so in 2014, a few students gathered and said, we don't like the direction we're going. And the regime was so used to getting its way, and this is the regime that was very close to Vladimir Putin, that they sent the secret police and shot people in the public square of Kyiv. And that reawakened the nation. People came on trains from all over the country. And then when the trains were stopped by the government in Kyiv, people came on buses. They drove through fields, and they showed up in the main square in Kyiv and squares throughout the country. And they resisted. And the nation really awoke in that moment. And today it's really telling. You can see so many impacts of that revolution, but the fact that the secret police no longer exist, the Berkut were disbanded in 2014 when the people took back their democracy. And you really can see there the contrast between Ukrainians and Russians. They actually did achieve their freedom, and that's why they call it the Revolution of Dignity. And so here we have in this war, the most, I think, wild, resilient democracy in the world, specifically because they're willing to put their lives on the line for it, and then sort of the most tyranny-tolerating society, which makes for quite a clash.
I was thinking of our conversation yesterday about Russia's Victory Day, that important day, and the military parade with one tank yesterday. That had to be an embarrassment, don't you think? How did people react there in Ukraine to that?
Yeah, that image of the one tank is seared in my mind, and people have been talking about it and speculating because, why one tank? Couldn't you even find a few? And so are they that desperate? And is it and it was an old tank, and so is it really that bad? But if it was really that bad, you think that they would try to put on a show,
right?
And so here's where I think we could easily get stuck in over speculating, where I think everyone here needs to be focused on being prepared for whatever might happen next, and not to, I think everyone learned that lesson when in early October, when something blew up part of that bridge, the Russian bridge from Russia to the Crimean Peninsula, and people were celebrating. It was a weekend. Lviv it was a wild celebration, and I think there were a lot of heavy heads Monday morning when the missiles started to hit. And I think ever since then, people realized you can't. This is a long haul, and a lot of times it's Russian propaganda, and so it is. There's a lot of speculation in the Western press. Very smart experts are trying to figure out, who, is Russia really this weak? There's a lot of speculation about what's happening in Bakhmut, but no clear information. And so I think, on the Ukrainian standpoint, it's, they're still making the case. And I think the smartest experts who support Ukraine, American veterans, are saying Ukraine really still urgently needs more advanced weapons, especially fighter jets, in order to now could be a moment to strike when Russia is not attacking as seemingly vociferously as it was in the past. Now would be a moment to strike rather than simply to wait for something to happen.
Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine. Joe, please take your own advice and don't get complacent. Stay safe. Look forward to our talk tomorrow. Thank you.
Till tomorrow.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Что он сказал?
Well, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чьей ты стороне?